Authorization to designate an elder in the district to call such a meeting. The district superintendent or the designated elder shall preside and shall appoint a secretary to keep a record of the meeting. Following a time of worship, opportunity shall be given to those in attendance to present themselves for membership. Then I think I'm just about out of time. The constituting church conference shall then be called to order by the district superintendent or by an elder whom the superintendent designates. A committee on nominations, elected on nominations from the floor as the reference may determine, or as the conference may determine, shall nominate members of the proposed church council. The chairperson of the committee on nominations shall be the appointed pastor. When the members have been chosen, the district superintendent or the designated elder shall declare the church properly constituted. And I could go on and on. I'm just trying to help you to see the common thoughts, ideas, and practices concerning starting a church. I think our time's gone. Well, after trying to share with you so many different points of history and quotations and comments and so forth concerning the subject of people starting churches or organizing churches. I want to suggest to you humbly that this type of activity, which I have tried to bring to your attention, is it's a situation where that men, and they're depending upon their own wisdom, have set up what I will call organizations. They come in different forms. There's some people call themselves the independent groups or independent churches, and they most of the time will have one pastor, they call him, and sometimes they'll have a board of directors or a board of deacons or whatever, and that's their organizational structure. Then you have the united groups that have central headquarters nationwide or worldwide, and they have their conferences and different societies and clubs, ministries, and so forth, scattered all down from the headquarters to carry out different functions. And it's on a broader scale. And I wish to suggest to you that this practice, this activity is entirely different from, in addition to, separate and independent of the assembly or congregation that God is calling out of the world by the gospel. Now, we have talked about that
that congregation, that assembly that God is collecting and calling out of the world, and how that when the person is saved, God puts them into that assembly, that congregation that He is, I keep saying, calling out of the world by the gospel. And there's an irony in this situation, I would call it, a strange thing, that as far as I know, all different denominations who practice what I will call receiving people into their particular church receive only those persons that they believe to have been saved. Now, try to think about that just a little bit. Here's a situation where a person wants to become a part of some particular church, and the powers that be, those that are in charge, will say, well, you've got to be saved before we can receive you into this church. And a lot used to, I don't know too much now, but years ago they used to give some kind of testimony that the person desiring to be received into that church had to give some sort of testimony, some emotional experience or vision or dream or something, to convince those they were appealing to for membership that the individual had in fact been saved. And if those who sat in judgment on the case decided that this person had really been saved, then they would receive them into that church and put their name on the roll. And they become a member of that particular organization. But now, please, as I said, think about that a little bit. If a person is saved, God has already put them in His church, if I may use the King James translation, God's assembly. They're in God's congregation. They're in the congregation, the assembly that Jesus promised to build upon the great confession that the Apostle Peter made when he said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Now then, if these individuals who are saved have already been put into God's assembly, by what right does anyone have to pass judgment upon those persons as to whether they will be allowed to become a part of an organization that men have set up, that is, as I said, different from, in addition to, and independent of this assembly that God Himself is gathering? Some will say, "Oh, no, that's not the case. We're all these different churches are part of that assembly." Well, then what's the need of having all the different ones? Who, and we're going to talk more about that hopefully. Who gives us the right to set up something in addition to what God's already doing? Uh, I know, and I understand why the listener is going to be tempted to say, now wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. That can't be right. Well, just try to be patient with me and hear me out. And then we're going to take up, Lord willing, later on some objections to this view and try to see if it will stand the test of the Word of God. Now, also I would suggest to you that to start a church in the common usage of the term today is what I will call an innovation. It's a different thing than the standard or the present situation. It's the use of a new idea or a new method. We've got this one method that God set up here. Acts 2:47. He added to his assembly everyone that's saved. Then we come along and we set up something over here we're going to call an organized church. That's an innovation. It's something new and different. And I bring that up partly, or in large measure, because in order for and to have its continuing effect, new and different must be in a constant state of change. Let me say it this way. An innovation is something new and different. It can be in a business, it can be in sports, it can be in religious matters. And I'm suggesting to you that starting these churches, the way I have read to you and described to you, is an innovation. But now I raise the point that new and different must be in a constant state of change in order to maintain the effect. In other words, what is an innovation today will be possibly old hat 5 years from now, and in today's world maybe less. And you've got to have constant change. It's like you see on washing powders or anything in the store nearly. It's new and improved, and they've got to have something to get your attention, and make you think you're getting a better deal all the time. And in order to draw the attention of the public, then these organizations of men have to be in a constant state of flux, I will call it, of change. I further would ask you to consider that when we get up here and we start a church, that we are substituting. We're making a substitution for that which God designed himself. Let me try to describe this situation a little bit more here and see if that's not correct. Churches now as far as I can find out, and reading and talking with people and observing, most of these churches are run like businesses. Most, if not all. The church has a bank account. Many of them make investments with the money that they collect. This organization called a church owns property. It has a board of trustees that are they sign the deeds of the property and so forth. They're in charge of it. They have treasurers. They need bookkeepers. And today, most, if not all, many of them are incorporated. That is, they exist as a corporation. And one of the reasons that's being done, I am told, is to limit the financial liability that that organization might come under or responsible for. I read an article not too long ago where these people were trying to sell information to different people that were starting their own church or had already done so. They're trying to sell them information to show them how to incorporate their church. And it said that suppose that you have an altar call and a crowd of people come forward, and in the press of the crowd somebody falls and gets hurt. They said, what are you going to do? Then the church will be liable for that injury. And so they say you've got to have a corporation. You separate that organized system called a church, so that the membership somehow or another is not as liable for it as it would otherwise be. And I can go on and on here. Most all these churches are recognized by the state and federal government to be non-profit organizations. They have tax exemption status. If they go buy something, they don't have to pay taxes on it. And as the way I understand it, they don't have to pay taxes on the property that they own. But with that comes certain regulations. In order to be to retain the tax exemption status, the churches have to comply with certain rules and regulations. One is, in politics, that church cannot promote a certain individual candidate running for a political office. Like we've got a presidential election coming up this year. And it's also coming, and it's just here, that when you start your church and you can't get up in that one of those assemblies, or like usually the hired preacher or the pastor or whatever, if he gets up and speaks against the sin of homosexuality, then you better be real careful how he says it, or then they'll be in a heap of trouble because of the so-called hate crime laws, and also this matter of being accepted as a charitable organization, nonprofit, and qualifying for being tax exempt. So more and more, as I read and study on this, I see these organizations that men have started and are starting, and how they're set up. They are not according to what I read in the scriptures. I don't read about stuff like that in there. And I'm asking you now just to think about it, and as we go on here, see how this winds up. We'll keep on, and we're going to compare it to what we read here in the scriptures, and then if I have to get down the road here so far and get to reading and turn around and say, well, I had the wrong idea on that, well, then I'm going to do it. I'll change my mind and say, well, I was wrong on that. We'll see how it goes. Also, in these, what I'm calling organized man-made churches, there's usually a statement of faith or a creed. I was in a building several years ago, and when we went in the little lobby there in the front, why, they had a piece of paper framed in there and had it typed out in there what they believed in. And that was a little independent congregation. Your bigger organizations, where they have headquarters, and conferences and all, they usually have a lengthy discipline or creed or statement of faith, and that is bound upon those who would be members of those organizations. And I mentioned earlier that in order to become a member of some, if not all, these, most of these churches, an individual has to go before practically a court system, and then you're voted on, decide whether they'll let you in, and then if you deviate from their creed, then you'll be called up before a board or set of judges or whatever, and they'll call for testimony and examine you, and if you don't measure up to their standard, then they'll put you out of that church. One man I heard about years ago said that he wanted to be a member of a particular church, and they required you to tell some type of experience that you'd had, that's saving or grace experience, or what, I forget what all they call it. And so he wanted that real bad, and he just made up a story about, I think it's something about seeing a wagon with the wheels coming off of it and going on down the road though, and the wheels going by the wagon, and then the wheels went back on the wagon, and I forgot how it went, something to do with the wagon coming apart and going back together. And they voted him in because, on that testimony. Well, he knew he'd made it up, and it bothered his conscience so bad. He was a very sincere individual, and time went by, and finally he just couldn't stand it anymore, and he just went up before the congregation and told them, said, I'm sorry, it's an awful thing, but I just made that stuff up about that wagon because I wanted to be a member of the church. And they voted him out. And he later told somebody, said, I told a lie and they voted me in, I told the truth and they voted me out. Now, I don't know whether that happened or not. Somebody might have made it up, thought it was funny. But it's not funny, because the principle is there. And it's a sad situation. Furthermore, I suggest to you that these organizations stress the importance of growth. Now, it's not so much the importance of the increase of this number that God's putting into His assembly. Rather, it's the stress and the concentration of the stress is on our church. This particular organization that we have started and that we are part of, we want it to grow. Now, I didn't make a note on it, but I'm going to mention it before I forget it. Years ago, and I've talked some about it, I'm not proud of it. I didn't know any better at the time. I was a hired preacher in a little congregation out in the country over in Warren County, Tennessee. Well, I had been studying quite a bit on the works of the Holy Spirit, and there was another little congregation over in White County, Tennessee, not too far from where we were. And they invited me to come over there one night or two during the week when this little church that I was hired by wasn't having a meeting, and come over there and talk to them about the works of the Holy Spirit, teach some lessons on that. Well, I did, and one of the elders in this little church there where I was there preacher told me in no uncertain terms, he said, "We didn't hire you to build up that church over there. We hired you to build this one up right here." And if I had, sometimes I say I have been so foolish, but if I'd had any judgment at all, it seemed to me like, looking back now and what I know now, I should have said, "Look, hey, let me get my stuff together and get out of here. This is not right. There's something wrong with this." But now that's the way these churches operate. And now some of them will deny it, and I'm sure there's just, I'd say it again, honest and good people in them. But I'm telling you, the emphasis is on growth. They'll tell you, I had the same thing told me. If I'm retelling these stories, I'm sorry. That same little place, when I went there, and they decided they wanted me to be their preacher, and I thought I was doing the right thing. They told me, said, "Now, we can only give you this much a month, money, but if you work and get out here in the community and bring a lot of people in here and the church grows, the number and the contribution increases, we'll give you a raise." Now, you check into it, and you see if I'm not right. The idea is, in these situations, I'm talking in generalities. I'm talking generally speaking, bigger is better. The more members they have, the more attendance they have, the more money they get. And a lot of them are taking up, receiving millions of dollars. Some of these mega churches, like I mentioned here a while back. And it feeds on itself. The organization feeds on itself. The bigger the crowd, then there's the need for the larger church building. And we've got to get one that'll seat thousands and thousands of people. Then the bigger the building or facilities requires more money to pay for it, more money to keep it up, to maintain it. and it requires more employees in the offices, in the groundskeeping, on and on. And